I do think after you're in a position for a while, and I don't know how long that while is, you really can, and this is a Cliff Madsen thing, you really can turn it into what you want it to be. You need to have a vision of the program that you want, and you need to have the wherewithal to make it be what you want. And you should be able to do that within 3 or 4 years. And that was something I always found happened for me. I was always very happy every place that I taught, and loved the experience. But part of that is making the program into your vision.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I really appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now, on to my next guest, Robert Sheldon. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Mark. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
So, Robert, can you introduce yourself for the listeners and let them know who you are and what you're doing?
Sure. I am Robert Sheldon. I'm currently the Director of Concert Band Publications at Alfred Music. I also write some music, and I do a fair amount of conducting, and have been a music teacher for 28 years before I took the job at Alfred. So I have a lot of passion for music education and music educators and their programs. I live in Normal, Illinois.
So, Robert, can you kind of, I'm sure most of my listeners recognize your name as a composer first. Maybe not so many know you as the editor at Alfred, but I'm sure plenty do. But can you, before we get into that stuff, can you talk about your musical background, how you got into music, maybe as a kid?
Sure. Well, my parents actually were vaudevillians. I personally played the Palace Theater in New York 6 months before I was born. So growing up with a mother who was a singer and a father who was involved in show business as well, there were a lot of musical personalities around our house from very early days. And my mom also, at a certain point in time, decided to open a dance studio. So, of course, I was surrounded by all kinds of music there as well. And then eventually when it came time, of course, I took piano lessons. They took me kicking and screaming to piano lessons, but I did that like all of us did when we were younger, and actually really enjoyed them, although my piano teacher wasn't so thrilled because I had a tendency to transpose things into keys that I preferred, and that doesn't really work when they're trying to teach you fingerings and how to read music. So my piano experiences with my private teachers when I was younger was probably more frustrating to them than it was to me, but eventually started into orchestra when I was in 6th grade, and then into band when I got into 7th grade, and had all kinds of wonderful experiences in music growing up through junior high and high school, and jazz band and orchestra and youth orchestra and wind ensemble and chamber ensembles and all of those kinds of things, and learned how to develop an interest in writing music while I was in junior high, and continued that into high school, and then from there went on to the University of Miami, where I went there at a wonderful time because I wanted to study composition with Clifton Williams and Alfred Reed, who I had just tremendous experiences with, and wanted to study conducting with Frederick Fennell, and again had some wonderful experiences there. So I was very fortunate to have the education that I had, and to be able to work with the people that I had was very privileged to meet and study with over time.
Robert, what's your instrument?
Depends on when you ask. Started on violin. My first band instrument was trombone. But my mom and dad, actually, after they left the vaudeville circuit, opened a nightclub in Florida. And when I was in junior high, they said, well, you need to play in the house band. So they started, I played saxophone and clarinet in the house band there. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I was playing flute in the orchestra. I was playing trombone in the wind ensemble, clarinet in the symphonic band, oboe in the concert band. I sang in the choir. I played tenor sax in the jazz band. I played bassoon in the woodwind quintet. I played trumpet in the marching band. I mean, it was just a variety of things because I had an interest in all of those types of things. So it just sort of depends. Nowadays, I think you could say my instrument is the stick, because I can carry that around and wave it in front of people, and that's about the only thing I ever really have time to do in terms of being able to make music myself other than writing.
This is such a fascinating story, Robert. One of the more interesting backgrounds I've had on the show with your parents and all the things that you've done. Do you have any thoughts or any memories of high school teachers or junior high teachers that were particularly important?
Oh, absolutely. And my junior high teachers, starting there, Bob Greatwood and Charlie Cornby were wonderful teachers, and they really encouraged me to be able to, just progress, and they were encouraging, and they helped me really realize a lot of my musical dreams, even at a very young age. They encouraged me to write. They encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do. And even, just learning other instruments. They knew I had an interest in that. Bob Greatwood would constantly find instruments for me to take home so I could just try them out. And then later he would say, well, why don't you play this in this ensemble or that one? So there was a lot of opportunity to do that. So he was also my high school director. Jeff Moore was my junior high director for a while. He was encouraging me to write and play in different types of ensembles. So they were all very encouraging. And actually, I was a difficult kid at that age because I was one of those kids that was getting bullied and beat up all the time. So for me, the band room was my safe place. And the kids there were nice to me, and I could kind of be myself and flourish and do what I needed to do. And I was treated there with a different attitude than I was in certainly than in phys ed.
Sure.
Where I had to be beaten to a pulp every day. But I had very good academic training through school, and I was very grateful for that. It allowed me to graduate from college in 3 years instead of 4. And the musical training I had gave me a great deal of certainly self-confidence. And I think it was a combination of all of those things really helped shape me as a music teacher over years by feeling a need to be aware of all of those kids who really needed the band more than the band needed them.
Sure.
And there's many of us out there, and some of those kids have just flourished and done wonderful things. And I think it's a very important part of what teachers really need to do, not only music teachers, but all teachers. And for me, I seriously can look back on this and say music really saved me. So I am very grateful to be able to have the life that I've had, and it's really music that provided that opportunity for me.
Yeah, often in this show, we talk about this idea of the band hall or the band room being the refuge that you just mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
And it most certainly was for me. I just talked about this with a recent guest about how, you spend every lunch in the band room because it's a safe place.
Yes. For years, I packed a sandwich in my trombone case. No wonder that case smelled really strange after. No, that was very much the thing. My girlfriend and I would constantly, we hung out in the, we were those kids that hung out in the band room.
Yep.
And I've seen that for years. I've never been one to encourage kids to hang out in the band, but while I was teaching, I was very well aware of the fact that was a safe place for a lot of kids, and I certainly didn't discourage them.
Sure, absolutely. And so when we often talk about the importance of music education, I think sometimes we forget that camaraderie or that sense of belonging is perhaps the most important thing we offer.
Oh, absolutely. And that and the interaction with the other students that are there. It's a very personal interaction with all of them. I think it's a great coming together of different types of people to be able to provide an experience that you just can't really get in another way.
Absolutely. So, Robert, we're going to talk about your current stuff now, but I'm really fascinated by your time at Miami and mentioning that you were there with Clifton Williams and Alfred Reed. You were there when they were at the same time.
Yes, it was a wonderful time to be there. Actually, the reason I went is between my junior and senior years of high school, I went to a jazz band camp at Miami. I was really into jazz and thought I might be a jazz major. So I went to a 2-week jazz band camp there, and it was a great experience. Jerry Coker was the teacher, and he was actually the reason I decided to go to University of Miami, was to work with him. And he was just a hero of mine. And when I had my audition at Miami, I played the instruments I played fairly well. I won't say I was, truly outstanding at anything, but I played them all fairly well. So I played first trombone in the all-state symphonic band, in Florida, but I also played tenor sax in the all-state jazz band. And I thought, well, I'm going to audition on both of those instruments because those are my strongest ones. And when I went down to do my sax audition, Jerry Coker actually walked through the room. His office was connected to that room. And he turned to the oboe teacher and said, this kid's a great oboe player, which was really a lie. I don't know why he did that. So the oboe teacher ran down the hall, got his oboe, came back, and he said, "Here, you play your sax audition on my oboe." And I was just panicked. And I said, but you really don't want to hear this, And he said, "No, do it." And he had me play my sax audition on oboe. And then he said, "Okay, you're an oboe major." So that was the end of that. And it was just sort of like, well, they paid me well to play oboe, so I could be an oboe major. But I still played in all the other ensembles and did what I wanted to do while I was there. But Jerry Coker left. He didn't stay. And he told me before I accepted the scholarship, he says, "I just want you to know I'm going to be leaving. I'm not going to be here when you get to college." But I did decide that was the place for me. I had always wanted to study with these other wonderful people. John Kenyon was there at the time. There were just some amazing people to work with. And, I had practically memorized every one of the Mercury recordings from Eastman, and to be able to play in the Fennell's ensembles was an absolute dream. So it was a great place to be. Plus, I could put myself through school by working out on Miami Beach, playing, all the different, venues out there. So it was really the perfect place for me to be at that time. And I had a great experience.
Yeah, it sounds like an exceptional time. And we know historically that so many composers of our current generation came out of Miami.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It truly is. And, and most of them were there after me, which would have meant they were there after Clifton Williams, because he passed away the year after I graduated. And, of course, Al Reed was still there, but he was really more involved with the music merchandising program at that time. But they've always had a history of lots of composers coming out of there, and many of them were good friends of mine.
So, Robert, can you tell me about your teaching?
Certainly. When I graduated from University of Miami in '75, I took my first teaching job in Palm Beach County, and I was teaching at a school called North Shore High School, which was in a very diverse area of West Palm Beach. It was a very challenging place, but the kids in the band were wonderful. They were amazing. Several of them went on to be music teachers at that point, and it was really. I'm still in touch with many of them. So I taught there for 4 years, and then went to the University of Florida. Following that, I got a master's in conducting with Frank Wicks. And while I was at the University of Florida, I also was asked to take over the conducting job at with the Alachua County Youth Orchestra, which was a great opportunity. It was a tremendous group. And then after I graduated, I was asked to stay on at the University of Florida, and I taught some music ed classes, but also was the director of bands at Pecan Laboratory School, which is where, as you and I had discussed earlier, Rodney Dorsey was my first clarinet player for 4 years and drum major. And so, and there were some incredible musicians that came out of that program, many of whom I'm still in touch with. I just saw one of them at Midwest Clinic this last few weeks. And so, again, really a very enjoyable place to be able to teach, although a very challenging one, because it was a before school program and it was a 5 through 12 band. But it was an amazing group, and I learned a lot there from the students. I really learned a lot. I went back home to Bradenton, where I grew up, and then taught at the school across town from where I went to school at Southeast High School. And I happened to hit there at a time when the community was really growing out on that east side of town. So the school just was growing exponentially, which meant that the band program also grew exponentially. And, I certainly had never been involved with a a marching band that had 330 kids in it, but by the time it got to that size, it's like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And really enjoyed the kids that were there. I got in touch with many of them to this day and had a wonderful experience. And it was during that time that I was invited to come up and apply for the job at Florida State University, where I would be director of the Marching Chiefs and also teach music education classes and be an assistant professor of music education there. And I took that job, and very happy that I did. It was not something I wanted to do forever, because the marching band emphasis was just so enormous, which it would be. You 450 kids in the Marching Chiefs. That's just, it's going to take up a lot of your time and energy. And I don't regret doing it, but I also realized it was not something that I wanted to do the rest of my life, because I like writing too much, and I had to give up something, and it seemed like everything was suffering at that point, because that just took so much time. So I left that position after 2 years, and I had met my second wife while I was there. Deb was getting her doctorate from Cliff Madsen, and we had gotten married while I was there at FSU. She was offered a position here at Illinois State University here in Normal, Illinois. We moved here in 1989. And I took another high school. Every place I've been, I've taught band and orchestra, with the exception of Florida State. But I took another band and orchestra high school position here at East Peoria Community High School, and just absolutely loved it. Had a wonderful time there. Great students, really a wonderful administration, and thoroughly enjoyed that for about 10, 11 years, until Alfred Music invited me to come on board as their editor for concert band. And it was just something I'd never thought I would do, but it seemed like a really interesting idea. And John O'Reilly was quite persuasive. And I thought, well, I probably should take advantage of this opportunity. And I'm extremely glad that I did, and very grateful to John for inviting me to come on board with Alfred, which has been about 15 years ago now.
Wow. That's an incredible story, Robert. Your career it's really interesting to me.
Well, it's interesting to me too, because I've gotten to do so many of the things I really wanted to do. And I've had some just fascinating people that I've had an opportunity to work with. I have actually had people tell me at times that they can, some people have told me they consider me to be the Forrest Gump of band music, because of people I've just, like, for instance, when I was in high school back in Bradenton, Florida, in 1971 is when they opened Disney World. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but when they opened Disney World in 71, they wanted to have a band like in the the closing scenes of the Music Man, where there's this marching band, had to be a boys band. And they wanted to play 76 trombones, so they wanted to have 176 trombone players. And that meant the marching band was going to be a 1,176-piece marching band. And they recruited boys from all over the high schools in Florida. I played trombone in that group, and my band director was Meredith Willson. And so,
oh my goodness,
our drum major was Jim Christensen was the drum major. I mean, to be able to come into contact with people like that. When I was studying with Frank Wicks to get my master's, Morton Gould came in for over a week to work with everyone, and Frank made it very clear, he is your responsibility. You learn everything about him. You prepare all of his music for him. You take him everywhere he wants to go. And to be able to have chances to meet and work with people like Morton Gould, or it's been I've been very fortunate to be in a lot of the right places at a lot of the right times. So and I don't take that for granted. It's been a wonderful experience.
So let me ask you about that. And I've asked other guests who have similar kind of experiences. How do you do that? How are you in the right place at the right time? What are you doing to prepare yourself? Or what qualities do you think someone has to have to be in that sort of frame of mind to be ready for that?
Well, I think you have to be lucky, but you also have to create your own luck. So I think there's first of all, you have to be open to taking a risk. You have to be able to say, even though this was not my plan, this looks like something that might be of great interest to me, and I'm going to take a chance on it. One of the ways that I found in doing that is, especially when going to college, getting either a master's or bachelor's degree, that I learned that every single faculty member there, even people you would never have an opportunity to see or work with, has something really valuable to offer. And that means that it is up to you to seek that out. When I was at University of Florida getting my master's, I literally went to every single professor, introduced myself, and said, can I please take something, learn something from you? Can I sit in your classes? Can I take private lessons? I mean, literally, I studied with every single person I could in one way or another, to be able just to see what they had to offer. And and in some cases, you would hear from lots of students, this is the worst professor this university's ever had. And I think, well, maybe what I'll learn from them is what not to do. But still, I wanted to be able to work with everyone. And I think by expanding your base of contacts, that also allows you an opportunity to be in those right places at the right time. And I think also it's a matter of your interaction with the people that you work with. Are you someone that is agreeable enough to work with that someone's going to say, hey, this is something you should do, rather than try and run from you and go the other direction. So I think it's important to be able to value the people you work with, show them that you appreciate them, reach out to them in any way you can, and then just be aware of what's going on around you so that you can take advantage of those opportunities if and when they arise.
So Robert, we should probably talk about what you're doing at Alfred.
Well, I just returned from Washington, D.C., where I was producing a recording session with service band members, mostly Air Force, but they were also from some of the other service bands as well. We do a recording session there every January, which includes all of our new music, which is going to be released later this spring. It will be coming out in March or April. So the recording session is all at once one of the most exciting, wonderful few days of the year, and also among the most stressful, because it's very expensive to do, and you have a finite amount of time to do it. So in some ways, it's like a rehearsal, or like a dress rehearsal, in that you have you have to let them go at the end of that rehearsal, and you have just this much amount of time to do it. And how are you going to spend that time? But in this case, it's not a rehearsal; it's a performance. It's being recorded forever, and so you need to find ways. In some cases, they are so good they play the piece through the first time. They're sight reading it, and it's basically perfection the first time through. In other cases, that's very much not the case. So you're constantly making decisions. How much time can I afford to spend fixing whatever it is you want to fix? And is it worth it, or is it not? Should we just do the whole thing again? Will it have a better feel to it? Will it be, you're always making these decisions because you have a finite amount of time. But in this case, this was probably the least stressful recording session I've done in 15 years. It just went extremely well. So what I do at Alfred now is I work here from home in Normal, but the office is in Los Angeles. Of course, we've been acquired by Peaksware, and their office is in Boulder, Colorado. So we've kind of got a couple of different headquarters there. I help select the music for the catalog. I have an acquisition team that I work with, but I listen to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of unsolicited manuscripts each year, try to put together the best well-rounded catalog I can, and then once pieces are accepted, I work with each of the composers to help prepare their scores for publication, which in many cases is a huge wake-up call, especially to someone who's never had anything published before, and they just have no idea the number of things that, details that they need to attend to. So, but I work with each of the composers and really enjoy that process a lot. I've got some great people that I get to work with, and I thoroughly enjoy all of them and how different they are from one another, and their writing styles and all of this. So I help get their scores prepared, and then I work with the production team to get their pieces engraved, and I work with the composers and outside proofreaders to get their music corrected, and work with the engravers to get everything exactly the way it needs to be. And then once it's all finished, we record like I did this weekend, and then I'll be working with the sound engineers to edit the sound product until we get that completely where we want it to be. Tempos correct, making sure there's no wrong notes, making sure everything sounds just the way we want it to be. And then I work with the marketing and sales teams to be able to get the music out, get a promo done, and then rinse and repeat. And we do this every year. So it's a really fascinating job, because I I really like working with all these writers, and it's a very interesting job for me because I have professional ADD, so I need like all different types of things to my squirrel moments where distracted by a shiny object, and this is great because I have them all built in. I just go from one thing to the next, and it's a lot of different things to keep me occupied when I'm not writing. And of course, I do a lot of writing and thoroughly enjoy that. And by being at home, it gives me more time to do that. Although I am out on the road, perhaps more than I'm home. I think my car was at the airport more days last year than it was in my garage. But I also love going out and working with honor bands and orchestras and working with kids all over the place. It's really fun. To me, it's one of the most enjoyable things I get to do because every weekend I'm out working with a different bunch of kids, and I get to share music with them and share my passion for music and learn from them and see what real kids are capable of doing these days, and try to find ways through the music to inspire them and talk to their directors and get to meet their parents. And it's just to me it's a wonderful way to spend a weekend. I mean, I can't think of anything any better.
So we should probably talk about commissions a little bit.
Sure.
What is it like to commission Robert Sheldon?
Well, I'm a pretty cheap date. So for most, the only thing that is a challenge, if you want to call it that, when working with me on a commission, because I'm pretty agreeable to doing pretty much what anyone is interested in having me do. The real challenge there is finding a time, because I generally get commissioned out 3 to 4, sometimes 5 years in advance. And I learned a hard lesson about 10 years ago, actually, where I had not learned to say no. And then I realized I had 13 commissions due in 1 year. And when that happened, it was a year spent where, honestly, Mark, every spare second of every day was, I've got to come up with another idea. I need to write. I need time. I need this. I mean, if I was standing in line at the grocery, I had a piece of manuscript paper in my hand. I mean, in the car, I had a clipboard with manuscript paper sitting on the passenger seat if I was at the stoplight. And I realized after that year, first of all, I was thrilled with some of the things that I came up with that year. I was very, very happy with productivity. But I also learned I don't want to do that to myself anymore, and I need to find a better balance. And what are the number of pieces that I can produce each year that I'm happy to do, that makes me excited to want to get back to writing each time I start a new project? Because I never want to get to feel like, oh, I have to write. I want to feel like I get to write. And I decided that number for me, it kind of settled in commission-wise, because I have to, notice I use the word have to there. Get to write a few more pieces each year that are not on commission that Alfred wants me to write for them also. But I figure on the commissions, if I limit it to around 4 a year, I can get those done and really enjoy them and feel comfortable with them, and at the same time do the other writing, which I'm asked to do at Alfred, and not feel as though I'm spent. So the real question is, when are we going to schedule it? And I unfortunately have to, not accept a lot of commissions because they will be at, well, can you do this for next spring? Next spring? No. 3 years from next spring, we could do it. But in some cases, it's something that people want to do right away. And I understand that. So the biggest challenge is just finding a date. But once we agree on a date, and I want to find out, a little more about the ensemble and about the grade level they're looking for. I want it to be something that, if they have an idea in particular that they want the students, something really pertinent or applicable to the community or the students, I want to find out as much about that as possible. If they have a vision of what they want their piece to be, and then when it comes time, work with them to be able to get the piece to be, something that really works for them. So, that's really all there is to it. We just find a date, we find a project, we agree on it, and off we go.
So, Robert, one of the things that has come up on the show a lot, and I get asked a lot by composers who meet me, is the question of being commercially published, being self-published, maybe being distributed through a third party, but keeping your rights. And Andy Glover and I had a conversation about this. So what Andy and I talked about was Sort of the benefits of being published as a composer through one of the big publishing companies versus being self-published, and what those different models look like for the listeners.
Well, there's advantages and disadvantages, and it really is going to depend on on several things to be able to find the best way of doing this. Now, the advantages of being published by a major publishing house like Alfred or Barnhouse, or there's several out there, are that number one, they will, you can go right back to the basics. They secure your copyright. You don't have to deal with getting your own copyright, paying for it, filling up the paperwork. Second thing, they will have the piece professionally recorded. You don't need to find anybody to do that. It's going to be done about as well as it can be done. They will be printing the music. They will be selling the music. They will be promoting the music. They will take care of sales and royalties and promotion all over the world to be able to get this done. And they have a pretty far reach, especially if it's a major publishing house, to work with all the major realtors and distributors. And so that's and the other part is your piece will look very good. It'll have a beautiful look to it. It might have a nice cover. It'll have it becomes something very professional looking. So that's the advantage to that. If there's a disadvantage to it, it probably would be if you look at the comparison of you publishing it yourself and having a publishing house do it. Your royalty base is much different. So this is now you get into publishing it yourself. If you publish through a publisher, it's a standard royalty rate of 10% of the purchase price or the retail price. And that's just standard everywhere. So you have to have a lot of copies of your music sold before it's something that becomes a financial windfall of any kind. But it's always nice to get a royalty check. But if you're looking to get, an enormous royalty check, you have to have an awful lot of music that sells extremely well to be able to do it that way. Now, if you self-publish, you get 100% of the royalty, which means you could sell 10 times less copies and still come out pretty much in the same place. However, if you're doing it yourself, you're responsible for the look and the feel of the music completely. It is you don't have an editor to take care of those things for you. You got to do that yourself. You have to mail it yourself. You have to print it yourself. You have to warehouse it yourself. You have to market it yourself. If it's the Midwest Clinic, all the major publishers are there and presenting. Well, if you're going to do it yourself, you probably need to have a booth there. And all of those things are very expensive to do. Plus, registering your work with ASCAP and registering your work with, as a copyright. So there's a lot of business details that you need to take care of. Now, if you are extremely popular composer, and you decide you're going to charge lots and lots of money for every piece that you write, and people are going to want to buy it, and you are self-published, you could do extremely well financially for yourself that way. But it's a question of how much time do you want to spend on all of those types of things. And that gets into this private life balance again. Do you want that to be your life? For me, I don't. For me, I am thrilled to be able to have a wonderful publisher that will, even though I'm involved with that part of it too, that will take care of all of those types of things, and I just don't have to worry about it. Alfred's a digital press; pieces don't go out of print, and they're going to be there, and they're going to be promoting them forever, and I'm very grateful for that, and I don't have to worry about the other part of it. So you have to kind of look at it from both sides. The same thing with the third party, like like J.D.B. Pepper will promote pieces that are self-published, for instance, and if you can gain a foothold and gain an audience, good for you. So really, you just have to decide personally, how much time do you want to spend on the creative part of it, and how much time do you want to spend on the non-creative part of it that's necessary to be able to promote and sell your own music. And that's something that everyone has to ask themselves.
Yeah, I think it sounds easier than it actually is to get your music out there.
It's very difficult to get it out there. I have people ask me all the time, what can I do? It's like the best thing you can do is self-promote. You need to contact people say, hey, I'd love for you to play my piece. I'll give you a copy of it. I'll come out and work with you. I'll meet the students, whatever you need. You need to get your name out there so people know about you and your music, and hopefully are really going to like it, and you'll gain an audience there. But it's a very challenging thing to do, and that's why I'm just so grateful that things have worked out the way they have for me, where that there are some people out there that do like to play things that I write, and I really appreciate that so much.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's interesting. I have a few pieces published through Grand Mesa, a few pieces with Robert W. Smith's company and distributed by Barnhouse, but I don't write a lot of music, and so it's really slow because I'm not putting a lot out there.
Right. And that's the whole thing. I mean, and it isn't so much about quantity, I don't think, as it is about quality. Because, if you were to make a list of your 10 favorite band pieces, I have a feeling they would all be by 10 different composers. So it's like one piece, if you hit that one piece that just everybody wants to play, then suddenly you're a big name. That's the thing, is to be able, we don't have a crystal ball.
Right. You get to just keep writing.
That's right. Yeah. Write it and throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. You have to be true to yourself too. You have to be able to write things that you're proud of and that you want people to know about and that you feel really good about, and that speaks, that's in your voice, so that it is a unique sound and something that people will associate with you, and that you'll be able to feel as though you've made a difference by writing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting growth, because I have a long and winding story as a composer that I've mentioned here before. I got my doctorate in composition. I was writing avant-garde music, orchestral music. My wife's a cellist, so I was kind of in that chamber music mode. Mm-hmm. Sure. And after I got my doctorate, I kind of got burnt out, honestly. I didn't feel like I was being honest to myself, as you just mentioned. And so I stopped writing for 6 years. And I started to write band music when I came back, because it was why I loved music to begin with, and I had kind of forgotten that.
Yeah. Well, you and I have actually a very similar story there, because Clifton Williams, most people probably are unaware of this, but he had very eclectic tastes. And if you listen to the music of Clifton Williams, you would think, oh, well, it always is kind of like this. The things that he really loved were way out there. And taking lessons from him, he was kind of pushing me in a direction that I thought, well, he just wants me to write the weirdest thing I can. And that's what I was doing. And I wasn't very successful at it, and I wasn't very happy. And I walked into his office one day with a pile of music, probably a stack about 2.5 feet tall, and plopped it on his desk. And he kind of peered over the top of the stack of music. He said, "What's this?" I said, "This is everything I've been writing that I've been afraid to show you." And he looked through and he says, "Well, this is all really good." And I said, "But I didn't think it's what you wanted me to write." And he said, "Well, I just want you to be you." And I said, "Yeah, but I want to be you."
Yeah.
Once we had that kind of moment of truth, at that point, things took off and went in a much different and much better direction. He was a wonderful teacher. I'm very grateful to him. But I do think that's the thing. You have to be true to yourself. You have to write you. Your piece needs to be you. Mm-hmm.
That's a hard lesson to learn.
Yes.
I feel like before we go on to the final questions, I feel like I want to touch a little bit more on kind of giving some nuts and bolts advice to teachers. So I'm wondering, do you want to talk about sound innovations as maybe a gateway into that?
I didn't know you were going there, so I'm very happy about that. Well, Sound Innovations I've been very grateful that I was invited to do that project. And it has been an amazing journey, because we talked with really a couple thousand teachers all across North America and some from abroad about things that they loved and didn't love about the method books that they had been using. And it just taught us so much about teachers and about how they teach and what they want. And so we created this first method book, and it kind of took off. And then we went to the second year of it, and it's done very well. And now it's kind of branching out in all different directions. So we have, I was involved in the writing of book 1 and book 2 on the band and the string side. And we've been just so thrilled because, all these states have adopted it as their only method book that they're using now. And we're just thrilled. And we got to work with all these wonderful artists who were doing our video component. And I learned so much from them. As they were doing these, at the time it was the DVD, now it's all live streaming. But at the time we were doing these DVDs, I would talk to some of the teachers as we would do this. I'd say, now, I want you to talk to the camera like you're talking to a fifth grader, and just bring all your personality and anything you would say to them that you think that it would help for them to remember these different things. And they'd say, well, like what? And I can remember talking to the sax teacher and saying, well, like, that, oh, gosh, no sound's coming out of my horn. And I said, and of course, the kid has to realize that their mouthpiece cap has gotten stuck up in the bell and is inside. And Simon said, no. And I said, yeah, really, and you tell him you gotta open the G sharp key before you start playing because it always gets stuck. And he said, really, that kind of stuff? I said, yeah. And so once we got into it, they would just go and talk about all these things. And I would go back and look at some of those videos and I think, oh my gosh, I would have been such a much better teacher had I had all these wonderful videos to look at. And about how to teach a trombone player to slur, how to do, and whatever it might be. So I've loved that whole experience. And now, of course, Sound Innovations has moved beyond that to where Peter Boonshaft and Chris Bernatas have been working on the ensemble books, and now a percussion book just came out this year. And next year, I'm currently working with Scott Watson and Brian Beck on a sight reading method, which as there just isn't any method book that actually teaches kids and teachers how to sight read and teaches teachers how to teach sight reading. And we're doing this in a completely different way than any other book's been done. I mean, we've been talking with English teachers about how they teach their students to read, and we're looking at national standards for language arts and applying them to music. And again, I have learned so much through this experience, and then getting to work with these two incredibly talented composers who are writing and developing this method. So we're very excited. By Midwest of next year, we'll have 2 volumes of the sight reading book that are coming out, and we were just absolutely thrilled about it.
So what advice would you give to a teacher as far as if they're teaching a student sight reading? What would be the first thing that you would tell them?
Well, I think that first of all, sight reading needs to be something. It's really I'm just coming back from these recording sessions. It dawns on me. This isn't the first time it's dawned on me, but it just reinforces the fact that sight reading is really a way for everybody to demonstrate everything they know about music immediately at sight. I mean, all of their experience with regard to sound, intonation, blend, balance, tone, expression, articulation, everything they know about music is encapsulated when in the experience of sight reading. So if they're doing something that they're not counting it right, they're not, whatever it may be, this means that that's a place, it reveals all the places that are a deficit in someone's musical training. So I'd say that the best thing to do in teaching sight reading to start with is do bite-sized pieces and focus on one element at a time, which is where we start, of course, in the Sound Innovations book. So, what element do you want to work on here? That's what we're going to focus on. Now we're going to read those things. Now we're going to move on to the next element. Now you're going to combine them. Now we're going to add another element. So it's taking bite-sized pieces, which actually, when you think about it, is no different than teaching anything else. It's just that sight reading has been one of those things that's sort of been, oh yeah, we need to sight read too. What we want to do through Sound Innovations is to show teachers, if you start with this as something that is a major part of your day, just 5 minutes with it, it enhances everything else you do the rest of your rehearsal, and you get a big bang for your buck on the return of your investment of spending a little time working on these sight reading books. Because it's more than just sight reading; it's how to be a musician, and I think that's something I think I'm very excited about the idea of being able to kind of cross that bridge and connect the dots for teachers.
Where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
I think there are some very positive aspects of the competition part of it for most ensembles, but not for all. And I think that there are a lot of unhealthy parts of it for everybody. So I think it really this is going to be something that is driven by the individual teacher, how they approach it, and if they see this as being a positive thing for their students. Obviously, ensembles that are more successful in terms of their performance ability, in terms of the product that they, the musical product they are capable of producing, are going to be more successful when it comes to competition, because obviously that's going to be a better performance. So, however, groups that are less successful with that can still learn a lot through the competition part of it because of the feedback they get from the adjudicators. I think one of the most important things is being able to see and experience really high quality ensembles and aspire to that. And I can remember that from way back in the day when I was teaching. And I didn't do, back in those days, there were not a number of competitions there are now. But I can remember, actually, we talked about Rodney Dorsey earlier in this, and I guess I'll bring it back to him. Rodney was one of the best drum majors in high school that anyone had ever seen. I mean, he just was. And we had a very good high school band there, a marching band and concert band at PK Young. And I actually entered a marching band competition for the first time that PK Young had ever done one in Rodney's senior year of high school, knowing that we were not a very large band. We were pretty good, but we weren't very large. And I thought, there's no way we're going to win this competition. But I do know that Rodney will win as drum major. So we're going to enter this thing. And I told the kids, we're not going here to, blow everybody out of the water or whatever. I want you to experience all these wonderful groups, have a great time performing. We're going to learn from what the judges have to tell us. I never even mentioned Rodney in the mix. We were just going to go and do this thing. We had a great time. They actually did very well. Of course, Rodney won Best Drum Major of the night. But they saw a band there, one band, that impressed them so much in terms of their discipline, in terms of their sound, in terms of their professionalism. And that's what they took away from that. And every time we performed the rest of that season, they were a changed group because they wanted to be like that other, they wanted to, I won't say mimic, but they wanted to be so much like that other group that impressed them so much. So I think there are good things about that. You don't have to compete to do that. You just have to see other really good groups to be able to do it and perform with them in some way. But I think that there are some, for the groups that are very good and they want to really, continue to improve through that type of event, that's fine. But I think that the problem is when the kids get to the point where the only thing about it that matters is winning, then I think that you've kind of lost track of what performance is all about.
It's really interesting as you talk about Rodney and how he was this great high school drum major and how you brought him so that he could win. I had a similar situation when I was a high school teacher. I had a saxophone player who was just outstanding as a jazz soloist. And he ended up going to the Berklee School of Music for jazz. Mm-hmm. But I took my group up to the Reno Jazz Festival, and I will admit it freely on this show. I am not a great jazz teacher because I'm not a jazz musician myself, but he won Best Soloist for the entire Reno Jazz Festival.
There you go. But the kids probably also really got a great experience listening to some incredible groups.
Oh yeah. My kids were really impressed.
Yeah, and it's the inspiration. I mean, that's really what I think we're all about as music teachers is inspiration, finding music that inspires kids and, finding, ways to inspire them to be better players. And in terms of being able to see groups that, it's one of these things where in so many cases, in so many different bands, the very best player that kid's ever heard is the kid that sits on their left.
Yep.
And be able to break them out of that and say, now listen to this, it can be a real wow moment for them that can inspire them in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that first moment when you get to a new school as a college student, whether you're going for your bachelor's or your master's or whatever degree it is, and you look around and you go, ooh, everyone's better than me here.
And you better hope that that's the case, because
right.
If you go to school where you're the best one, you're probably in the wrong place. Because that's one of the best parts about being in a great place like that is to aspire to something greater than where you are at the moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Robert, how do you achieve a work-life balance?
I am still working at this, but I have learned a bit because I'm really old now. So, I've tried a lot of stuff, and I think I finally kind of figured it out. Number one for me is I have learned that when it comes time for dinner time, and since I'm the chief cook and bottle washer around here, when it comes time for dinner, my office is closed. And I'm not going to come back up here and work in the evening. I mean, now I can't say I never do. There might be some looming deadline where there's just no way out of it, because all I'm going to do all night is sit and stew about it and won't sleep all night. So yes, you might as well come up and get to work. But that's rare these days. I really try and shut everything down and then have the evening to do the stuff that I want to do with my family. So there's that. The other thing that I've learned to do is to plan vacation time far in advance. And I plan a lot of them. I mean, a lot of them. My partner and I go on 3 major cruises every year to get us far away from, I mean, we get pretty remote. I mean, we have an Antarctica cruise on the horizon here. I mean, we go to some pretty remote places and have some great experiences, but it's a great way to disconnect. And by doing that, it forces me to say, I am not working for the next 3 weeks or whatever it is. And it just becomes a different type of thing. Now, having said that, it doesn't always work. This last spring, we were actually on a cruise. We started in the middle of the Amazon, and we got to dinner that night. And they said, oh, well, would you like to sit with other people or sit at a table for 2? And we said, oh, you know what, we'll be happy to sit at another table. We sat down, sitting across from this nice couple. I said, where are you from? He said, I'm Oregon. I said, oh, really? Whereabouts? He said, Ashland. I said, I was just in Ashland recently. And he said, were you? And I said, what were you doing there? I said, I was doing some work at the university. He says, really? What department? And I said, music. And he kind of squints his eyes and leans towards me and says, you're Robert Sheldon. Now, I'm in Manaus, Brazil. You know, the last thing I was thinking, and I looked at him, I went, yeah, and you're Max McKee. I mean, what were the odds that Max and Nell are going to be sitting with us at dinner in the middle of the Amazon rainforest? So you can't always get away from it. And in this case, I'm glad I didn't, because Max and Nell are just delightful. But yeah, we try to do that and we have a few other like week-long getaways we do during the course of the year. And that helps keep the balance going.
Boy, Robert, you are truly indeed the Forrest Gump of the band world.
Isn't that weird? It's just a very strange thing, but I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it's strange.
So, Robert, this is a big question and an important one. What are the challenges facing music education and band, and how can we best meet them?
Well, the obvious ones, I think, are being able to maintain or develop support for the program. That's a big one, because you have to do it yourself. There's no one that's going to help you with that. You need to be able to get people on your side, especially administrators. You need to be able to work with other teachers. You need to get funding. You need to have parents on your side. And the only way to do this, I think, is to create a successful experience for the kids and inspire them and show people how important this is. But I think that one of the things that I learned, and comes at a late age for me, and I actually learned it from Lowell Graham, of all people, is we were doing an honor band together in North Carolina. And here's somebody who is, I would not say he was a music educator. He's just a great conductor and, Air Force and all this. And I'm talking to him, and he is so passionate about the idea that it's what band kids are all about. They embody the skills that future employers are going to want. And so I did a little thinking about this after talking with him, and I thought, he is so right about it, because right now, kids in high school, when they graduate from college, the jobs that they're going to go into may not even exist yet. They're going in, they're getting a college degree, but it's not so much anymore what your degree is in. It's really that you have a degree and who you are. So what do employers really want from people who they're looking to hire? They're looking for self-starters, people that are reliable, people who can lead, people who can work with others, people who have attention to detail, who understand the value of professionalism and understand what hard work is and aren't afraid of that. And they know that things that are worthwhile are going to take time. They're not afraid to put the time into it. They're creative. They're not afraid of a challenge. They know how to listen. They know how to present themselves professionally. They can be part of a team. They can perform with passion and conviction. They can be enthusiastic. I mean, all these things, when you think about it, what class is there in school that teaches this? And I can only think of one, and it happens to be the one we're involved with. And I'm not going to say just band. I mean, you can do this in orchestra too. You can do it in choir too. But I think that there's something about music students that prepares kids to be able to be the people that everyone's going to be looking for tomorrow. And you can get a little bit of this in other areas, but I think music is the only place where kids get all those experiences, and it's an everyday type of thing. We need to be the biggest cheerleaders we can to inform people about how this experience is probably the most valuable thing that the kids can get while they're in high school. And no one's going to do it but us. So that's, I think, the greatest challenge.
All right, Robert. So you're 18 and you're looking across the high school podium, the dais at yourself. What advice would you give yourself?
I think that because of where I came out of, I kind of the metamorphosis I went through high school and, building confidence, there was a way that I think I got to a place where I took myself way too seriously. And I think in looking at what my goals were and what I wanted to do, I was very serious about it. But I think they were very specific things. And I think, I'll tell you what, I look at a Peanuts comic strip periodically, and I think it kind of, it's the philosophy of Charles Schulz here. There's a comic strip where Charlie Brown asks Linus, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And Linus says, "Outrageously happy." That to me is what I would tell myself then, that it's, all these other the minutia of how you're going to get there. Yeah, it's important too, but keep your eye on the bigger prize. And that is, do things that make you happy and find ways to turn what you're doing into a happy experience.
All right. So I don't ask this question to be morbid, but I ask it this way to kind of elicit what's most meaningful to you in music. And if you could plan it out, what would be the final work that you'd either conduct or hear, and why?
No, actually, there's a piece that just comes to mind, and I'm not afraid to give you the example. I think there are moments in all of our lives as musicians where there's something transformative that happens to you when you hear a specific piece of music. In my case, it was when I was, and of course this happens continuously through your life. Hopefully you're always hearing something that's transformative. But when I look back, there's one piece in particular that for me was a life changer. And it was when I was at the University of Miami, and my oboe teacher used to give me tickets to hear the Miami Philharmonic play in that gorgeous Guzman Hall, the one downtown that was the Fox Theater that they transformed into that beautiful concert hall. Had the stars in the ceiling with the clouds would move across it, and the orchestra was wonderful. And I would go and sit in he'd give me tickets to the balcony. I would sit up there and listen to them play. And I loved all the concerts. And one night they played a concert, and then they came back to do an encore. And it was a piece that wasn't on the program. I didn't know what it was. And it absolutely took me to a place I'd never been. And it was the ballet Daphnis and Chloe by Ravel. And when I had to ask him the next time I saw him, what was that you played last night? And he said, well, it was the second suite from Daphnis and Chloe. And I immediately went down to the music library, and of course they were records back then. And I found the record of it, and I listened to it, and then I bought the record. And for me, it was the scoring, it was the just the harmonic structure, the effects, and it had quite an effect on me. And if there was something I was going to listen to that was going to send me off into another space and time, that would probably still be it, because it also brings back a lot of really good memories.
All right, Robert, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Well, I don't want it to be a marketing thing at all here. I mean, I'm going to be out doing a lot of guest conducting this year, some all states and regional groups. And so I'm hoping if I'm in anybody's neck of the woods that you'll stop by and say hello. As I mentioned, we're really looking forward to the sight reading book coming out, Sound Innovations, next year. And I have a lot of premieres coming up this year, and I'm very grateful to all the people who have asked me to write music for them. And I'm very excited about all the pieces that are coming out, because in many cases they're There are very different types of pieces for me. That's one of the things now. I'm constantly looking for new inspiration to create different types of sounds and different kinds of pieces than I've done in the past. They're still going to sound like me, but I want them to be something that's also new and different and exciting. So I'm very, very excited about a lot of the new pieces that are coming out this year. And so hopefully if I run into any of your listeners at those events, they'll come up and say hi.
All right, Robert, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, funny you should ask that question. I have a website, robertsheldonmusic.com, and there's a way to get a hold of me through that site. But I was just before we got on the podcast here, I happened to get a call from someone, and they said, we contacted you, but you didn't respond. And turns out they asked me through that website. So I went to my junk mail, and I'm finding that there's a lot of people who contacted me through robertsheldonmusic.com that for whatever reason wound up in my junk mail. So feel free to go to the website. At least you can see where I am and what I'm doing. But the easiest way to do it is just robertsheldon@hotmail.com. Just send me an email, and I will definitely be able to respond.
Excellent, Robert. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Mark. It was a pleasure talking with you today.